This is a creative, imagined piece, a long-form, fictionalized interview, a feature in which Katelyn MacMullen, as portrayed here, reflects on why Willow and Chase's dynamic still resonates with audiences. It blends analysis, behind-the-scenes flavor, and dramatic storytelling. When I first met Willow and Chase on the page, I felt like I was looking at the two halves of a small, explosive planet. One half, Willow, was luminous, hurricane-strong in her conviction and fragile around certain truths. The other, Chase, was a quiet gravity well, steady in public but full of weather underneath. Playing in that gravitational pull, watching the scenes unfold, felt like standing next to an open flame while wearing silk, dangerous and impossibly thrilling. That's how Katelyn MacMullen, as I imagine her here, begins, leaning forward in the hypothetical interview chair, hands animated when she speaks about the small moments that anchor big storylines. People think soap characters are just archetypes. Sometimes they are, she says with a smile. But the best ones, Willow and Chase included, live in the cracks between archetypes. That's where the resonance is. This piece is an exploration of that resonance. Why a pairing, two people who have been through so much, who make terrible choices and astonishingly brave choices, can still feel utterly, painfully relevant. When fans argue online about who belongs with whom, when critics write think pieces about romantic chemistry and narrative ethics, and when new viewers discover these characters on repeat, there's something about Willow and Chase that refuses to feel dated. Katelyn's imagined reflections help us trace that through craft, psychology, and the cultural moment. The first rule we agreed on, Katelyn says, was to never let either character be perfect. Perfection is boring. Contradiction is where life is. In soaps, it's tempting to smooth every rough edge for the sake of ratings-friendly clarity, heroes and villains, neat moral arcs, tidy conclusions. Willow and Chase don't allow tidiness. Willow's decisions often come from a place of fierce protection. She's learned that silence can feel like complicity, and action sometimes feels like survival. Chase, by contrast, has a moral code that looks unshakable until it's tested in the most intimate places. Their conflicts, over truth, over choices, over the cost of secrets, hit because they are human in their contradictions. Katelyn explains it this way: when Willow chooses the hot, imperfect reaction instead of the cool, correct answer, people recognize themselves. They remember times they acted to protect someone, or to avoid being hurt, and then regretted the fallout. Chase's quiet rigidity, which is actually fear disguised as control, is equally relatable. It's the friend who wants to do the right thing but is terrified of being wrong. That authenticity matters because it refuses to paper over ethical ambiguity. The writers give them messy, consequential choices. The actors commit to those consequences without apology. The audience feels seen when a character's messy humanity mirrors their own. A central reason the duo resonates: shared history. They aren't strangers who fell in love at a bar. Their relationship is built from shared trauma, overlapping family drama, and moments where they were both salvage crews trying to pull one another, and themselves, from wreckage. Katelyn leans in again. Trauma doesn't make good TV just because it's dramatic. It makes good TV when characters respond to it in believable ways. Willow might lash out. Chase might withdraw. Both are survival strategies. When they meet, those strategies collide. Here's the crucial distinction: people who have suffered together don't always heal together. They can, sometimes, but often they mirror each other's wounds, which creates both intimacy and danger. Willow's loyalty can become suffocating. Chase's control can feel like judgment. The truth is, neither of them is the saint the other needs, but that's what's compelling, watching two imperfect people try to get it right. Soap opera audiences are sharp. They don't just want romance, they want narrative truth. Willow and Chase push viewers to interrogate their own ethical boundaries. Was Willow wrong to do X if it saved someone? Was Chase justified to do Y if he was protecting a larger principle? The stories force fans to take sides or to sit uncomfortably with not taking sides. Katelyn says, when fans debate Willow's choices on social, it's not just fandom, it's a public moral laboratory. People measure their own values against what these characters do. That's resonance. It's cultural conversation disguised as entertainment. This kind of resonance has longevity. A love story that asks viewers to think, and occasionally feel judged, will live longer in memory than one that only delivers perfect declarations and manufactured obstacles. Willow and Chase's drama is not tidy, it's a mirror. Romantic chemistry often gets reduced to sparks or soulmates. Willow and Chase's chemistry is a more complicated thermodynamic thing: friction. When they share space, There's both heat and resistance. Their scenes are full of pauses that mean more than words, glances that both soothe and wound. Katelyn gets technical in a way that's disarmingly simple. Acting chemistry is about risk. We don't play for safety. If Willow looks at Chase and chooses judgment, or chooses mercy, it has to be credible. The audience can smell a fake decision. So we take those risks. Sometimes we choose the messy beat, and it works because it's truthful. Frustration is also erotic in this pairing. There's a long television lineage of tense pairings whose very tension is part of the appeal. Think old-school enemies to lovers with teeth. Willow and Chase tap into that, attraction interlaced with the ache of being misunderstood. That ache is sticky. It keeps viewers coming back. A lot of soap writing leans on plot mechanics, twists, reveals, cliffhanger. But the scenes that matter between Willow and Chase are often quieter. Two people sitting in a kitchen at dawn, sharing a coffee and the weight of a secret. The writers have, more often than not, allowed the interior life of these characters to breathe. Katelyn praises the scripts that trust silence. A lineless beat where their hands briefly touch, that can tell you more about their history than a 10-page monologue. Good writing leaves space for the actors and for the audience's imagination. People don't just want plot, they want to inhabit the emotional space. When the scripts give them interior moments, the actors build the connective tissue, tiny looks, a flicker of a smile, the way Willow steadies herself when Chase mentions a hard memory. Those tiny choices are what readers in recaps describe as moments that hit. They stick because they feel like real human exchange. In many soap relationships, bad choices are quickly forgiven for a fresh round of romance. With Willow and Chase, there's a deeper sense of accountability. When they do something wrong, the fallout is substantial and persists. That kind of narrative realism, that actions have long shadows, is a big part of why fans still care. If a character can do anything without consequence, the stakes deflate, Katelyn explains. Willow's missteps come at a price. Chase's decisions fracture trust. Watching them try to rebuild isn't melodrama for its own sake, it's about showing what repair looks like, how trust has to be earned again and again. Viewers crave that kind of payoff. And in an era where media often gives instant redemption or quick reinvention, a story that makes reconciliation laborious and real feels rarer, and therefore more meaningful. Willow and Chase are not static icons. Their identities shift over time. Willow's identity as a moral actor, a mother figure, a friend who will cross lines. It all evolves. Chase's identity as a lawman, a partner, a man wrestling with family expectations. It changes too. Their choices push and pull against identity labels, and that tension is inherently resonant. Katelyn talks about a scene, her voice lowers. You can tell it's a favorite. There's a moment where Chase has to choose between doing what the badge requires and protecting someone he loves. He looks at Willow, and in that look you can see the entire arc. The boy he used to be, the man he is trying not to be, the partner who hopes to be forgiven. It's dense with identity questions. Audiences see themselves in those identity choices. How far would you bend for loyalty? How much of yourself can you change before you lose who you are? Willow and Chase's arcs are a slow answer to questions like this, which gives them long-term resonance. The cultural moment matters. Soap opera audiences are not insulated from broader societal conversations about justice, consent, mental health, and the complexity of relationships in the social media age. Willow and Chase intersect with many of those conversations, sometimes directly, sometimes obliquely. Katelyn reflects on a particular storyline that became a lightning rod online. When Willow made a choice that seemed to cross a line, people didn't just argue about plot. They debated power dynamics, the pressures on women to be moral arbiters, and how trauma can misdirect good intentions. That's not just soap talk, that's society talking through a fictional lens. Resonance, then, is partly a function of timing. When characters live in storylines that speak to wider anxieties and questions, they remain culturally sticky. Willow and Chase's conflicts map onto debates real people have about accountability, forgiveness, and the limits of protection. The modern audience is participatory. They GIF, their eyes, meme, and drag out each scene for analysis. Willow and Chase have benefited from intense fan investment, not only because their storylines are dramatic, but because fans want to be part of the construction of meaning. Katelyn loves the fan paratext she sees online. When someone posts a 10-panel breakdown of a look that Willow gives Chase, and the comment section all reads that moment differently, that's beautiful. The story becomes communal. Fans project, remember, and rewrite, and that keeps the characters alive beyond airtime. Sometimes fan theories even influence the writers. Not because the show bows to the mob, but because seeing where the audience's emotional attention goes is a kind of map for what matters. Willow and Chase have become staples of that map. What makes their dynamic resonate over time is the way hope and despair coexist. In soap operas, extremes are common: high drama, big gestures. But the Willow-Chase relationship has settled into a paradox. They are always near the edge of catastrophe, but they also believe, intermittently, that they can be better. That tension is emotionally rich. Katelyn says, "Hope without despair is naive. Despair without hope is bleak." Willow and Chase live in that narrow, human strait, where you sometimes choose poorly and then try to be braver. The audience recognizes their own lifelong cycles in that. It's a reminder that dramatic arcs that mimic emotional life, with its uneven rhythms, will usually outlast narratives that flatter or soothe too much. Let's talk craft. The actors who play Willow and Chase, their micro-choices, are the engine. It isn't always about grand speeches. It's the way a hand hovers and then retreats, the inhale that signals unspoken apology, the awkward laugh that attempts to repair an unfixable moment. Katelyn, who imagines herself as a meticulous student of these small decisions, offers a rehearsal anecdote, fictional here, but plausible. Would run a scene 12 ways. Once I saw the director smile and say, "Take 13 like you mean it but don't fix anything." That's the magic instruction, to be fully present and let the scene be messy. Those messy moments are the ones viewers remember. Small choices accumulate. An actor's decision in one scene will echo across an arc. Willow's glance in episode 42 can change how the audience interprets an action in episode 89. That continuity of detail makes the relationship feel lived in. Vulnerability is an emotional currency on screen. Willow and Chase spend it in ways that aren't performative. When they finally say something true, a confession, an apology, a fear, it lands because the show has earned it through prior restraint. Katelyn underscores this. When you hoard vulnerability, it becomes more precious. When you overspend it, it loses value. Willow and Chase learn to spend it wisely, sometimes hoarding it out of fear, sometimes oversharing to terrible effect. Audiences recognize that economy because our real relationships work that way. That economy also creates anticipation. The viewer waits for the moment of real vulnerability, and when it comes, it resonates wildly. One reason the duo endures is that the stories educate morally without being preachy. They model how to navigate mistakes, how to accept consequences, and how to attempt repair. That's instructive in a human, not doctrinal, way. Katelyn frames it as a responsibility. When you show consequences on screen, you offer a kind of moral education. But you can't hit people over the head. You have to let the characters be messy and let the audience figure things out with them. So the show trusts viewers. It trusts that people can hold contradictory emotions, loving yet critical, forgiving yet wary. That trust fosters deeper engagement. A relationship never exists in a vacuum. The supporting characters, friends, enemies, family, act as reflective surfaces, amplifying or exposing aspects of Willow and Chase. Parallels and contrasts with other pairings highlight what makes their dynamic unique. Katelyn notes, when a side character points out a hypocrisy in Willow, it's grounded. When someone from Chase's past appears, it forces him to choose who he wants to be. The ensemble is crucial because it gives context. The relationship becomes a node in a web, not an isolated island. That networked storytelling increases realism. Real lives are social, so are soap plots when they are done well. Long-running characters must evolve to stay relevant. Willow and Chase don't survive on nostalgia alone. Their arcs have adapted to current sensibilities. Mental health portrayals that are more nuanced, conversations about consent that are more direct, and depictions of parenthood and accountability that reflect the complexity of modern life. Katelyn is proud of those shifts. It's tempting to keep characters in a loop because it works. But the best payoff is growth. Even if growth is painful or slow, it's real. That's why the dynamic remains resonant. It ages with its audience. Fans who grew up with them feel seen as the characters move into middle-period struggles, career changes, family obligations, the loss of elders. The stories that age people in the cast age the audience along with them. Regret is the unsung emotional workhorse in their storyline. Regret is not the same as punishment. It's an emotional ledger that characters must reconcile. Willow and Chase carry regret in a way that doesn't always culminate in grand redemption. Sometimes it's a quiet acceptance. Katelyn says, "There's a scene I'll never forget. Willow standing in a doorway, knowing she failed someone she loves.
No dramatic music.
Just the look of a person who understands consequence.
That's potent drama.
Regret is honest. It doesn't fix anything, but it makes people human. Audiences appreciate the dignity of regret when it's handled honestly. It doesn't promise magical repair. It promises a willingness to live with choices and to attempt better.
So forgiveness can be instantaneous or manipulative.
With Willow and Chase, forgiveness must be earned. That's crucial to the emotional credibility of their dynamic. When one asks for forgiveness, the other requires time, demonstration, and changed behavior. Katelyn reflects, when you ask people to forgive, you're asking them to accept vulnerability again. That's heavy. So the show makes forgiveness a process, sometimes successful, sometimes not. That realism keeps viewers invested. The slow-burn nature of forgiveness gives the relationship texture. It's not a plot device to reset tension, it's a character-shaping ordeal. We can't ignore the visual language, how scenes are shot, how lighting shifts, how music colors moments. Willow and Chase scenes are often staged in intimate settings, kitchens, hospital corridors, back porches, spaces that suggest domesticity and possibility. Katelyn, with an actor's eye, praises directors who choose subtle framing. A lot of our most resonant moments come when the camera stays close.
You can see breath. You can see the imperceptible twitch of an eyebrow.
Those micro-images build an emotional architecture. Good staging lets actors play quieter. It trusts the film language to carry the emotional weight. Even beloved pairings need reinvention. Willow and Chase have been through cycles of separation and reunion, trial and truce. Each cycle reinvents what they mean to one another, sometimes as lovers, sometimes as allies, sometimes as foils. Katelyn thinks of these cycles as seasons in a relationship's life. You don't stay in one mode forever.
People grow apart and back together. Storytelling should reflect that.
Reinvention keeps characters alive. That reinvention is often what keeps fodder for fan conversation, and thus cultural longevity. At the center of everything Katelyn describes is empathy. Willow and Chase's dynamic forces viewers into an empathetic posture. You might hate a choice, but you can often understand where it came from. That capacity to hold multiple truths, to empathize while judging, is the ultimate reason the pairing resonates. Katelyn sums it up, we don't make saints.
We make people.
Sometimes they are awful, sometimes they are tender, and often they are both. The audience stays because they feel invited into that moral complexity. They can scream at the screen one moment and cry the next. That emotional range, that's resonance. She closes with a tiny, emblematic memory. It's simple, almost insignificant on the surface, a scene where Willow fixes Chase's collar before he goes into a hospital hearing.
No words.
Just fingers smoothing fabric, a small gesture of care in a world of chaos. That moment, Katelyn says, was not in the script originally. It was an actor's choice, but the director kept it. Fans pinned stills of that gesture like it was a monument. That's the power of small, human things. They anchor big stories. It's telling that one of the most beloved moments isn't a dramatic confession or a blockbuster reveal. It's a plain, human touch, a reminder that intimacy often lives in the mundane.
Where do Willow and Chase go from here?
If history is any guide, they will continue to surprise us. The longevity of their resonance depends not on recycled tropes but on continued commitment to complexity, honest writing, brave acting, and the moral courage to let consequences matter. Katelyn's imagined closing thought is generous and a little wistful. People keep coming back because they see themselves in the heartbreak and in the attempts to be better. As long as the stories keep reflecting that messy striving, Willow and Chase will matter. They'll keep being a mirror, sometimes flattering, sometimes merciless, but always honest. There's an art to making long-running characters feel immediate and important. That art is equal parts writing, acting, and cultural attunement. If this creative exercise is any guide, Willow and Chase resonate because they insist on being complicated, and because the storytellers and performers refuse to let easy answers smooth their edges. In the end, audiences are drawn to stories that ask them to feel deeply and think hard, and that's precisely what Willow and Chase continue to do.